This is part 2 in a series of videos taking a serious look at the concept of authority. In the following videos, I'm going to take you through several stages in order to fully understand why the belief in authority truly is the most dangerous superstition in the history of the world. First, the concept of authority will be distilled down to its most basic essence so it can be defined and examined objectively. It'll also be shown that the concept itself is fatally flawed and that the underlying premise of all government is utterly incompatible with logic and morality. In fact, it'll be shown that government is a purely religious belief, a faith-based acceptance of a superhuman mythological entity that has never existed and will never exist. Now, I don't expect most people to accept such a startling claim without ample evidence and sound reasoning, which will be provided. It'll also be shown why the belief in authority, including all belief in government, is horrendously dangerous and destructive. Specifically, it'll be shown how the belief in authority dramatically impacts both the perceptions and the actions of various categories of people, leading literally billions of otherwise good, peaceful people to condone or commit acts of violent, immoral aggression. In fact, everyone who believes in government does this, though the vast majority does not realize it and would vehemently deny it. Finally, the viewer of this video series will be given a glimpse into what life without the belief in authority could look like. Contrary to the usual assumption that an absence of government would mean chaos and destruction, it'll be shown that when the myth of authority is abandoned, much will change, but much will also stay the same. It'll be shown why, rather than the belief in government being conducive to and necessary for a peaceful society, as nearly everyone has been taught, the belief is by far the biggest obstacle to mutually beneficial organization, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence. In short, it'll be shown why true civilization can and will exist after the myth of authority has been eradicated. But first, we gotta identify the enemy. To assess the concept of authority and determine its worth, we gotta begin by clearly defining what it means and what it is. Guys, from early childhood, we're taught to submit to the will of authority, to obey the edicts of those who, in one way or another, have acquired positions of power and control. From the beginning, the goodness of a child is graded, whether explicitly or implicitly, first by how well he obeys his parents, then by how well he obeys his teachers, and then by how well he obeys the laws of government. Whether implied or stated, society is saturated with the message that obedience is a virtue and that the good people are the ones who do what authority tells them to do. And as a result of that message, the concept of morality and obedience have become so muddled in most people's minds that any attack on the notion of authority will, to most people, feel like an attack on morality itself. Any suggestion that government is inherently illegitimate will sound like suggesting that everyone should behave as uncaring, vicious animals, living life by the code of survival of the fittest. See, the trouble is that the average person's belief system rests upon a hodgepodge of vague, often contradictory concepts and assumptions. Terms such as morality and obedience, laws and legislatures, leaders and citizens are used constantly by people who have never rationally examined such concepts. The first step in trying to understand the nature of authority or government is to define what the word actually means. What is this thing called government? Government tells people what to do, but that by itself does not give us a significant definition because all sorts of individuals and organizations tell others what to do. Government, however, does not simply suggest or request, it commands. But an advertiser who says, "Act now," or a preacher who tells his congregation what to do could also be said to be giving commands. But they are not government. See, unlike the commands of preachers and advertisers, the commands of government are backed by the threat of punishment, the use of force against those who do not comply, those who are caught breaking the law. But even that doesn't give us a complete definition, because street thugs and bullies also enforce their commands. But they're not government. The distinguishing feature of authority, is that it is thought to have the right to give and enforce commands. In the case of government, its commands are called laws, and disobeying them is called crime. Authority can simply be summed up as the right to rule. It's not merely the ability to forcibly control others, which to some extent nearly everyone possesses. What distinguishes a street gang from government is how they are perceived by the people they control. The trespasses, robbery, extortion, assault, and murder committed by common thugs are perceived by almost everyone as being immoral, unjustified, and criminal. Their victims may comply with their demands, but not out of any feeling of moral obligation to obey, merely out of fear. If the intended victims of the street gang thought they could resist without any danger to themselves, they would do so without the slightest feeling of guilt. They do not perceive the street thug to be any sort of legitimate, rightful ruler. They don't imagine him to be authority. The loot the thug collects is not referred to as taxes, and his threats are not called laws. The demands and commands of those who wear the label of government, on the other hand, are perceived very differently by most of those at whom the commands are aimed. The power and control the lawmakers and government exert over everyone else is seen as valid and legitimate, legal and good. Likewise, most who comply with such commands by obeying the law, and who hand over their money by paying taxes, do not do so merely out of fear of punishment if they disobey, but also out of feeling of duty to obey. Guys, no one takes pride in being robbed by a street gang, but many wear the label of law-abiding taxpayer as a badge of honor, like it's something good. This is due entirely to how the obedient perceive the ones giving them commands. If those people are perceived as authority, a rightful master, then by definition they are seen as having the moral right to give such commands, which in turn implies a moral obligation on the part of the people to obey those commands. To label oneself a law-abiding taxpayer is to brag about one's loyal obedience to government. In the past, some churches have claimed the right to punish heretics and other sinners, but in the Western world today, the concept of authority is almost always linked to government. In fact, the two terms can now be used almost synonymously, since in this day and age, each implies the other. Authority supposedly derives from the laws enacted by government, and government is the organization imagined to have the right to rule, i.e., authority. Now, it's absolutely essential to differentiate between a command being justified based on the situation and being justified based upon who gave the command. Only the latter is the type of authority being addressed in this video series. Though the term is occasionally used in another sense, which tends to muddle this distinction. For example, when someone asserts that he had the authority to stop a mugger to get an old lady's purse back, or says he had the authority to chase trespassers off his property, he's not claiming to possess any special rights that others don't possess. He's simply saying that he believes that certain situations justify giving orders or using force. To contrast that, the concept of government is about certain people having some special right to rule. And that idea, the notion that some people, as a result of elections or other political rituals, for example, have the moral right to control others in situations where most people would not. That's the concept being addressed here. Only those in government are thought to have the right to enact laws. Only they are thought to have the right to impose taxes. Only they are thought to have the right to wage wars, to regulate certain matters, to grant licenses for various activities, and the list goes on. When the belief in authority is discussed in this video series, that is the meaning being referred to. The idea that some people have the moral right to forcibly control others, and that consequently, those others have the moral obligation to obey. Now, it should be stressed that authority is always in the eye of the beholder. If the one being controlled believes that the one controlling him has the right to do so, then the one being controlled sees the controller as authority. If the one being controlled does not perceive the control to be legitimate, then the controller is not viewed as authority, but is seen simply as a bully or a thug. See guys, the tentacles of the belief in authority reach into every aspect of human life. But the common denominator is always the perceived legitimacy of the control it exerts over others. Every law and tax, federal, state, and local, every election and campaign, every license and permit, every political debate and movement, in short, everything having to do with government, from a trivial town ordinance to a world war, rests entirely upon the idea that some people have acquired the moral right, in one way or another, to one degree or another, to rule over others. Guys, this is part 2 of a video series that takes an objective look at the legitimacy of authority or government. Stay tuned for subsequent parts of this series. Guys, thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up and share it on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to see more videos like this, click that big red subscribe button down there, and as soon as I upload a video, you'll be one of the first to see it. If you want to support this channel, pick up one of these hard-hitting, conversation-starting shirts. You'll find the link in the description below, along with a plethora of other hard-hitting, high-impact designs. Remember, guys, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and indifference to this notion is the means by which the people will secure their own oppression. Let's stop securing our own oppression, and let's start today. I'll see you guys in the next video.